Hundreds of men were locked up here, but this day they sent up a woman, and the sight had everyone excited. But they quickly noticed she had a piece of paper in her hand. When they opened it, it read, "She's the last one." That meant no one else would ever be sent up through that passage again. It turned out these people were trapped in a maze that could move. Every morning, the massive doors would slowly open, and everyone could go out to search for an exit. But no matter how hard they tried, after 3 full years, they still hadn't found a way to the outside world. At dusk, the doors would close automatically, and from the outer edges of the maze, the roars of monsters could be heard from time to time. To keep everyone alive inside the maze, the runners were responsible for going out to find a way out, while the others farmed and maintained the camp. Because accidents could lead to some people dying, a mysterious passage in the maze sent up one new person every month, and everyone who arrived had their memory wiped. Thomas was terrified on his first day here. He started running frantically until he fell and finally got a look at his surroundings. The walls hundreds of feet high stunned him. The only exit he could see was that narrow gap. Then Thomas found the leader, Albie, and started asking about what was on the other side of the passage. No matter how much he pressed, Albie refused to tell him the secret and said no one was allowed into that passage without his permission. That only made Thomas more curious. Just as he was about to go check it out, Chuck, the kind-hearted chubby kid, stopped him. Just then, 2 men came running out of the passage and Thomas was confused. Chuck explained that they were the runners. Their job was to go outside the maze and look for an exit. Thomas still wouldn't give up and wanted to go in, but Gally, the bully and the third in command, shoved him to the ground. The commotion drew a crowd. Thomas said he wanted to leave and didn't understand why everyone was stopping him from going into the passage. Albie said they were doing it to protect everyone. Then suddenly, a loud grinding noise came from behind Thomas. As the gears at the top slowly turned, the massive door slammed shut. Everyone around him seemed used to it, but Thomas, who just arrived, was still in shock. Late that night, the second in command, Newt, told him a secret. The maze changed every night. Thomas asked if that was even possible, and Newt said the maze was being controlled by someone. Because the walls shifted every night, they'd never been able to escape. Newt said the runners were the only ones who really knew what was out there. They were the strongest and fastest. If they didn't make it back before the doors closed, they'd have to spend the night outside, and no one survived a night in the maze because monsters came out after dark. Soon, the group welcomed Thomas with a feast. Even Gally, who'd bullied him earlier, came to make peace. But then, from the outer edges of the maze, the roar of a monster echoed through the air, and Thomas had no choice but to believe what everyone was telling him. The next day, one of the runners got infected while out searching for a way out. With no cure, the group had no choice but to exile. When night fell, he faced almost certain death. The following day, Albie went out with another runner to fill the empty spot. But as dusk approached, the 2 still hadn't returned. The doors began to close. If they didn't make it back in time, they'd be locked out.
Something's wrong.
Just then, the runner Miho dragged Albie toward the entrance. Both had clearly been attacked by monsters. The doors were closing fast, but Miho refused to abandon his combat. Everyone yelled helplessly. But suddenly, right before the doors shut, Thomas sprinted through at full speed. Thomas had no idea how serious this was. As he went to check on Albie, the roar of a monster echoed in the distance. The 2 of them quickly hoisted Albie up and tied him to a high spot with vines. Just as they were about to succeed, a monster crawled out from the end of the corridor. Miho panicked and ran, leaving Thomas and Albie behind. Thomas quickly secured the vines and was about to flee, but then the slime on the ground caught his attention. The sight before him terrified him. He took off running, but the monster was right behind him. After a long chase, Thomas used some vines to temporarily trap the creature. Miho, who had noticed something was wrong, came back to help and led Thomas through the familiar terrain. Suddenly, a bold idea struck Thomas. Miho yelled at him to run, but Thomas stood his ground. He didn't flinch as the monster charged at him. Only when it got close did he sprint away, luring the beast into a narrow passage. The next morning, when the doors slowly opened, everyone looked disappointed. They hadn't expected Thomas and the others to make it back. But just as the crowd was about to leave, someone turned and saw the unbelievable. Thomas and Miho were carrying Albie back safely. Everyone was overjoyed because since they'd all arrived, no one had ever survived a night in the maze. Thomas had broken that legend. Miho said Thomas had not only seen a monster, he'd killed it. Thomas earned Miho's respect, but Gally wasn't happy. He said that for 3 years, they'd coexisted with the monsters outside to keep this place safe, and Thomas had broken that balance. No one knew what would happen next, so he wanted to punish Thomas. Miho argued back. In the
This dumb
chaos,
shank.
Thomas had saved Albie and killed the monster for the first time ever.
Whatever it is, we
He
need more
believed
of
the
it.
group needed that spirit. But while they were arguing, a loud boom came from the delivery passage in the maze. Everyone ran to look.
Coming back up.
But Thomas had only
should've
arrived 3 days ago, which
what do you
didn't
see?
match the usual 1-month interval. When they opened the crate, they found a girl, and she seemed to be holding something. Newt unfolded the note, which
What was
read,
that?
"She's the last one." That meant no one else would ever be sent up through this passage. While everyone was confused, the girl suddenly woke up, called out Thomas's name, and passed out again. After settling the girl down, Thomas wanted to go back into the maze to find answers.
the plan?
With some persuasion,
Gotta go
Miho
stop,
agreed to
then
take a
I'm
few
in a hurry
people
to
with
get
him.
back out.
They soon reached the spot where the monster had died. After some inspection, Thomas noticed something on the creature. Miho grabbed the monster's head and pulled out a metal device. The number 7 on the screen caught everyone's attention, though none of them knew what it meant. As night fell, they returned to camp. Miho then took Thomas to a small hut and pulled back a tarp, revealing a map of the moving maze. Thomas was shocked. Miho said he and his teammates had spent 3 years mapping it. He'd recorded every pattern in every cycle. If there was a way out, they would have found it by now.
these numbers.
Thomas asked why he didn't tell anyone, and Miho said Albie didn't want everyone
We
to
have a real
lose hope.
chance.
Miho explained that the maze had 8 sections, and every night all the walls shifted. That was the reason they could never escape.
Through 8.
Just then, 2 other runners showed up with news that the girl had woken up. Thomas found her and got a crucial clue. She had been sent up with 2 vials of medicine. They didn't know what they were, but Thomas guessed it might be a cure. He told Newt about his idea. Seeing Albie in so much pain, they decided there was nothing left to lose. The next morning, as the doors opened, Thomas and Miho went back into the maze to search for an exit. After a long run, they reached Section 7 because they'd figured the dead monster had come from that area. Then the metal device behind Miho started making a noise, and Thomas quickly pulled it out. They tested it and found that the sound sped up in a certain direction, as if the device was pointing the way. Thomas said it was guiding them. Following the sound, they found a hidden passage. Miho was curious. In his memory, that passage had always been sealed. They walked forward slowly, but then the red light on the device turned green. With a loud crash, the stone door behind them slid open, revealing a mysterious cave. Moving closer, they saw piles of slime and realized this might be the dead monster's lair. But then lasers inside the cave started scanning the perimeter. Alarms blared, danger closing in. They ran for their lives, and by then the walls of the maze were already shifting. With Miho leading the way, they sprinted back to camp and made it just before dark. Later, they told everyone about what they'd found in the maze, but Gally was furious. He said Thomas's reckless behavior could bring disaster to everyone. Gally said it had been 3 years and asked Thomas what that proved. Maybe it was time to do things differently. Thomas shot back, asking if Gally thought he should be in charge. Newt chimed in, saying it was Albie's call. Everyone went to Albie's room. Though the virus had been cured, he was deeply discouraged. Thomas said they'd find a way out soon, but Albie just shook his head. Thomas asked what he meant, and Albie stared at him as if everything was connected to Thomas somehow. Just then, commotion outside caught their attention. When they went to check, they saw that the doors that should have been closed were still open, which meant that countless monsters could flood in at any moment during the night. On the other side, another set of doors slowly opened. No one had ever seen this before. Then the nightmare began. Monsters swarmed in every direction. Everyone ran in panic, and many of their comrades were brutally killed. They took cover in a hut, but the danger wasn't over. The walls wouldn't hold for long. A monster grabbed Chuck with its tail, but the group pulled him back. Albie fought back with a weapon, and after a fierce struggle, the monster finally let Chuck go. Just when they thought they were safe, the monster struck again, snatching Albie away. Thomas tried to stop it, but couldn't. In his final moments, Albie told Thomas to lead everyone out. Thomas was devastated. He went outside to try and rescue Albie, but saw the monsters retreating. Then Gally stormed over, furious and without a word, punched Thomas, because he believed everything that had happened was Thomas's fault. The loss of his comrades crushed Thomas. He looked at the monster's weapon in Chuck's hand, thought about Albie's words, and made a bold decision. He grabbed the weapon and drove it into his own leg, because that was the only way he could regain his memories. Flashes of a laboratory scene raced through his mind, and finally he remembered everything. When Thomas woke up, he and Teresa had been locked in a cellar by Gally. Thomas told everyone the truth. He was one of them, he'd always been here, he'd worked in the lab. Newt and Miho weren't angry, they were on the same side, and Newt believed Thomas would lead them out of there. The next morning, Gally planned to exile Thomas and Teresa to appease the monsters, but then he changed his mind and decided to execute them. He said, "Did you really think I'd let Thomas come back? Look at our glade, that's the only way. When the grievers get what they came for, everything goes back to normal." Teresa said that if they stayed, the monsters would attack every day and everyone would die.
Shut up!
But Gally
Time
wouldn't
up.
listen. Just as he was about to kill them, Thomas grabbed a weapon and knocked him down. Newt and Miho joined the fight, and the group was split. Thomas said they didn't have to come,
with us,
but he was
we are
leaving. Anyone who wanted to come had
I'd
one
rather
last
risk my life
chance.
out there.
Several men joined him. Most chose to stay behind. Thomas led his group into the maze. After a long run, they reached Section 7, but a monster was guarding it. With a shout, everyone charged at it with their weapons. After a fierce fight, it was clear that their weapons couldn't do much serious damage, and several of them were knocked unconscious. With everyone working together, they finally made it to the other side of the passage. Teresa and Chuck took the device into the cave and found a guide at the end. Thomas guessed it was a code based on the maze's opening sequence. Miho recited the opening pattern for all 8 sections, and the door slid open. Stepping out, they found themselves in a secret laboratory, and it looked like a fierce gunfight had taken place there. Thomas pressed a button on the screen, and a female scientist appeared. She explained that humanity was being attacked by a deadly virus that infected the brain. To find a cure, the lab put people into harsh environments to study their brain activity. As armed personnel appeared on the screen, the scientist took her own life. Soon, a squad of armed soldiers arrived and everyone was loaded onto a helicopter, leaving the secret facility behind. But just as they thought they'd escaped, they had no idea that this was only phase 1 of the experiment.